Spectrovision Radio.
Like, say we got to a very advanced point in the future where time travel is really not a big deal. If they can just produce a perfect human being that is completely void of a consciousness and it's wired perfectly, and you can just basically like plug into it and operate it and do that carefree anytime you want, and then just kind of get out. And they talk about how they have this like biofield around them where it regulates the temperature and everything, that they create their own energy so they don't even have to eat food. They don't have to do this stuff, but they're human, they're biological. And it's like, okay, well, if they can do that, right? Like, and this is just year 3000 something. So we're not talking about like a million years in the future or anything, you know? So it's like, okay, so obviously creating like an anti-gravity craft and be able to like take that physical avatar and actually traverse time and go back in time shouldn't be that hard. I mean, we're on the doorstep of that now. Some people think we cracked that in the 50s. So I guess my point is, then what would stop them from like going all the way back in time? Like say you wanted to just really escape, right? Really get some peace and quiet. Where would you go? You know, where would you go? You would go back in time before humans got all messy and noisy and dropping bombs and doing all the stuff we do now, satellites everywhere and messing up and polluting the earth and all that kind of stuff. You'd go back in time, wouldn't you? Because guess what back in time is? Back in time, you could select. You could pick your place and be like, ooh, this place is nice. There's no humans anywhere, no pollution, everything's perfect. And you could set up shop there, you know, with your capabilities, your time traveling capabilities. And you could just kind of have your little R&R happy spot there. Well, what if that is the basis for like Atlantis? And, you know, people talk about fallen angels, you know, getting it on with human women and having these Nephilim and that kind of stuff. Well, what if that's like the fallen angels are like these future humans, this H+, that are these soulless vessels, these vehicles for consciousness to inhabit and kind of joyride for the purpose of consciousness development and producing loosh and a little bit of R&R at a spiritual level. And, you know, they actually came back in time, and they weren't supposed to, obviously, but not everyone's going to do exactly what they're supposed to. But what if they, in this story, like, you know, were tempted by the human women, and that's the story of the fallen angels, you know, because you have to be the same species, you have to be compatible, you know, because you can't, you know, if you're not the same species, you can't get it on and produce anything, right? It's not the way nature works. So they'd have to be the same species. In this case, you know, these future humans, this H+ that Robert Monroe describes, is a engineered biological human being based on current humans, just fully activated and very advanced. So they could possibly be what we would call the fallen angels, you know? They could possibly be what we'd call the Greek gods. They could possibly be what we would call the Atlanteans. They could possibly be what we call the Nordic aliens. And they might just be future human avatars. Hello friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Conscious Observers. We're going to melt some minds today because we're going to go to the future to get to the past. I know that might seem a little counterintuitive, but you're just going to have to watch the whole episode and figure out how I got there. So this is going to be connecting the ancient Atlanteans and these breakaway civilizations with these Nordic, quote-unquote, extraterrestrials that everyone keeps encountering, and future humans, and even what Robert Monroe calls humans plus, H+, the next generation of non-physical human being. Yes, I'm going to bring this all together, guys, because that's what we do here. It's intuitive investigation, pull on these threads. So in the last video, I talked about Atlantis and Atlanteans. We even talked about the Nordics. These are recurring themes that keep coming back. And as I was listening to my favorite American philosopher, Jason Reza Jorjani, was on the Jesse Michaels show the other day, he was talking about this theory that he has. And it's funny because I did a video years ago. It was actually my most watched TikTok video that I've ever done, like 4 million views. And it was about the idea, my idea was that since if we live in this closed system simulator and you get to a certain technological point and you realize, oh crap, we can't escape because it's a closed system, like meaning we can't physically get in spacecraft and leave Earth or leave the solar system. I believe that's the containment area, that the best thing that you could do, because at that point you've mastered like gravity manipulation, and when you manipulate gravity, you manipulate time because of the space-time continuum, and they're intrinsically linked. So as we get more technologically advanced and we can manipulate gravity, we also manipulate time, and we turn these UFOs into time machines. And I was like, okay, well, if these future advanced humans can't leave physical Earth, maybe they would just go back in time, you know, that's sort of travel. Instead of traveling to the stars, we would travel to other time periods on Earth. And I had this theory that our ancient ancestors, like the Atlanteans, could actually be future humans based on this premise. And I explained in that video how it accounts for these things. Like back in the day, we had these archaeological sites that are very advanced with sacred geometry and mathematics and things encoded in these sites and built in ways that we can't even do today, like the pyramids and things like that. But also there's those like reliefs of the handbags seen all around the world that are linked to like the Anunnaki and Quetzalcoatl and things like that, of like these that seem to be like all over the world, even though these cultures and these even like geographical locations weren't in any way connected. So I was like, okay, there's some advanced beings way back in the day. And I was thinking, okay, well, maybe they're actually future humans back in the day. Anyways, my thinking was that this is a closed system and these are advanced humans that couldn't physically leave, so they start traveling temporally. And then I heard Jason Reza Jorjani talk about it on the Jesse Michaels show in a little bit different way, but he was basically saying the same things about how these Nordics are future humans that are possibly escaping something, like escaping a cataclysm in the future, or some sort of a point that they get to where they just can't go any further, like a wall, or maybe an invasion, or something is happening in the future and they're running from it. And the way that they run from it to escape is to escape into the past. And that a lot of what we call gods, the lowercase g gods, you know, these Greek gods and the Egyptian gods and these Anunnaki and these different deities and demigods, are these future humans, and they might not be the best chaps, right? They might not be the best folks. And they're kind of stuck, lost, whatever they're doing, scrambling. Maybe there's different factions of them warring and fighting and all these kinds of things. And he went in depth, and he's a brilliant man. And, I love his theory. And I was like, that's crazy, because I had a similar theory, but mine was sort of based on the fact we might be in what I call the simulator, which is a closed system. Okay. But it did mirror the fact that we're both talking about how the advanced races of our past could actually be from the future. And that's kind of the thread I want to pull on here, because it's not something people usually talk about, but there's so many people out there in the world, archaeologists and historians and scientists, that cannot explain our ancient past. They just gloss over it, or they come up with some BS explanations of how people were able to do what they did. But I mean, people are out there like Jay Anderson, who I love from Project Unity, and different people like that are scouring the world looking at these ancient sites, and it's just not making sense. I mean, the only way to make sense of it is if they had some sort of advanced technology. And not only that, they have some sort of a precognitive vision of the future, because a lot of the things that they do when they interact with us, a lot of the stuff that they even built is pointing towards some sort of future calamity or reset happening. And a lot of these sites and a lot of the tellings and a lot of the like personal contact that we get from these beings is warning us of things and trying to guide us through these kind of choke points in our future, almost as if they know what's coming. Well, how would they know what's coming if they're not from the future? It seems like they either have a wider grasp and perspective of everything and can see the road ahead that we can't see, or they've been there, or they have an ability to traverse time in ways that we can't explain. Okay, so we see these Nordics, even the MUFON data that collects data from UFO and alien experiencers and abductees, that kind of stuff. They say that the top two, by far, quote unquote alien encounters are the Greys and the Nordics. These Nordics pop up everywhere. I mean, they are just a very prominent being, in UFO lore, spiritual lore, all sorts of, they're everywhere, okay? And I thought, okay, here's something that's super interesting about the Nordics. And this is what brought me to Robert Monroe and his sort of telling of this future story about humans plus, H plus. And what connected in my mind was like, oh, those people that Robert Monroe is talking about might be the same people that we're talking about that we call Nordics. Okay, if you haven't noticed, when people describe these Nordics, they say that they are pretty freaking perfect, like Ken dolls. Like they're tall, they're muscular. They're a lot of times they're even tanned. It's like, okay, if they're like space beings or if they live inside the earth or whatever, how are they tanned? Like, how do they have this perfect tan? Why is their hair so healthy? You know what I mean? Like, why are they so muscular? Like, wouldn't they have technology and telepathic powers and this kind of stuff where they don't need to like lift weights? They're not going to the gym. Like, why are they so buff? Like, they always describe them as being like lean, right? But very healthy, very muscular, very just perfect, you know, piercing blue eyes and flowing blonde hair and big physique and perfectly built and no fat on them at all. And they speak telepathically. They don't really show emotion or anything like that. And I was like, oh my God, these are genetically modified and bioengineered avatars, beings. I don't think they're natural. I don't think they're natural beings. And here's how I got to this. So Robert Monroe, in his second book called Far Journeys, towards the end of it, second to last chapter, I believe, he goes to the future around year 3000, okay? His guides that have been guiding him through all these amazing astral adventures through consciousness and space-time take him there to show him this probable future outcome based on our current trajectory and some of the things that he was doing at the Institute and other people were doing. They said, if you keep doing what you're doing, other people keep doing what they're doing, this is the probable. Remember, I've talked about in many videos, we live in a probabilistic universe. Everything it's not determined, like predetermined, it's self-determined by our actions collectively, and we create this probabilistic future. It's basically we have possibilities, and each possibility is assigned a probability, and they were saying this is the most probable future outcome if everything keeps going the way it is. And what they described, they took them here, and it's amazing. So they went to Earth, you know, somewhere right past the year 3000. They said they quit keeping track of times. They didn't know exactly what year it was, but it was after 3000, because 3000 is when they stopped keeping time. And it's so interesting because as he's kind of coming in, you know, over Earth, there's no roads, there's no planes, there's no boats, there's no anything. So he thinks, okay, all humans are gone. You know, something terrible happened and, you know, humans are gone. They're like, no, we evolved. Now we have what's called human plus. And instead of like having, you know, Robert Monroe is famous for coining the term out-of-body experience. So instead of having out-of-body experiences, they have in-body experiences. They have, under trees, like oak trees, cherry blossoms, different trees, have different types of beings, these human avatars. And basically what he finds out is in the future, humans have evolved to where they don't need to be in the physical body anymore. So instead of having out-of-body experiences, they have in-body experiences, right? So check this out. There's this ring, you know, kind of like Saturn's ring around Earth. And that ring is called the dorm. And that's where all the souls are, the human consciousnesses. And they're there in the non-physical. They exist completely non-physical. They've ascended to the point where they don't need the physical body. But they still use the physical body for certain things. They use it, A, to produce loosh. They figured out what loosh is and what their role in the loosh production is. And also for like R&R, right? And then also just for you know, having experience, producing qualia. So they use the qualia as like a subjective personal consciousness experience. So when you have an experience, you make a free will decision, you do something, it generates like emotions and learning and that kind of stuff. That's qualia. And that's how we kind of develop at a consciousness level. Okay, so they come in as souls, as consciousnesses, and they'll come down and they'll just kind of go into a body. And these bodies are in these pods underneath trees. And the same way that we would like rent a car, you know, it's like, okay, I want to rent a Lamborghini this weekend and cruise around and have some fun. They would do that with the bodies. And when they describe these bodies, they always describe them as being in like tip-top shape. I mean, very lean, young, youthful, vibrant, healthy, you know, muscular. They always describe them as being very, very beautiful, almost like this perfect human specimen, which made me start thinking, okay, well, in the future, these H+, these humans, this next evolutionary step of human beings that we get to enter into voluntarily from a conscious level, same way we would put on like a VR headset and play a game, or we would rent like a jet ski and go have an adventure. This is what human consciousness in the future does with human bodies. The physical aspect is voluntary, you know, it's not a part of your daily life. She told Robert Monroe, that about twice a week on average, they'll enter into the physical and have this, you know, choose a body. They have their favorite bodies, but they can choose different bodies, and they go have experience, create qualia, do things, and they go back up to the physical or non-physical. So these H+, these humans in the future that are in these pods under these trees, seem to be bioengineered somehow. They seem to be created, maybe not artificially like in a factory per se. I don't believe that. I believe that in the future they just have complete and total control over creation and manipulation of physical matter, but they're able to create these human beings in this perfect form. And they remind me of when people talk about the Nordics. This is the way they describe them, as being so beautiful and radiant and attractive and kind of perfect. So it made me start thinking, okay, if in the future they have been able to figure out a way to bioengineer these bodies for the consciousness to be able to come down to Earth and have these experiences from time to time, then what if those same beings are able to traverse time and come back physically to where we are now? Now, there's plenty of evidence that at a non-physical consciousness level, we are being interacted with and in some ways manipulated or guided, whatnots, from different intelligences, right? There's a lot of what we call alien encounters with non-physical beings, right? It seems physical to us at the time, but then we find out later that it's like in this hypnagogic dream-like state. It's in the astral, it's at a consciousness level, something like that, that it doesn't really seem like they were physically there, but it seems so real. So we have tons of evidence that that happens. I've even had some of my own astral experiences with non-human intelligences, especially when I was at the Monroe Institute. It's kind of normal there, right? So that happens. But let's say one of these kin dolls in the future, one of these H+, wanted to actually, or say like a consciousness, entered into one of those, and they wanted to actually come back to here, to now, physically. Well, they would probably need a craft to do that, right? Like, you know, so we see these craft here that kind of pop in, pop out. They all seem to be kind of 3D printed in a way. Each one's totally different. And it made me start thinking, I was like, man, in the future, I really think that they have this capability to produce one-off beings, one-off bodies, like avatars, like a physical body, and one-off craft just for specific things, almost like disposable, throwaway type things, because they just get to create it. They're just morphing it, folding it, and forming it out of this plasma clay that our physical matter reality is made out of. So I was like, okay, so Robert Monroe's even saying, this gets really wild, but in the future, when he goes to that year 3000 and whatever, and his guides are telling him, explaining this world and how everything works, that as new consciousness, so they have this thing called the dorm. The dorm is this ring around Earth, and it's this, like the spirit world. It's what you'd call it. It's the non-physical realm where the consciousnesses reside 99% of the time when they're not in physical bodies. And that's called the dorm. They call it the dorm. And so they're there as they're having these experiences, doing their part in the Loosh production and collection as they're waiting for their final ascension order so that they can actually click out and graduate out of this level. Okay, so those are like the human consciousnesses. A lot of them have been there a long time. They know the deal. This is their place. But then he said that sometimes newcomers come in, like new consciousnesses come in that aren't from this Earth life system. They haven't been human before. They don't know the deal. So when they first come in, like a new student to a school, this gets really wild. They say, okay, before you can go down there into the human body, and you know, it's almost like before we'll give you the keys to the car, you gotta go to driver's ed first. So you know what they do? You know what their driver's ed is for these seemingly alien consciousnesses that are just coming to Earth and wanting to jump into a human Earth life experience? They send them back in time. Where do they send them? Well, they send them to different epochs and different time periods, but one of the main ones they send them to is right now. Right now. If you're wondering why there's 8 billion humans right now, this is one of the training grounds. This is one of the training grounds for the future, to be able to get into the H+, to be able to take one of these human plus avatars and be able to be a part of this future Earth system that seems to be far more controlled, far more rigorous, far more, I would say, dialed in, right? It's less chaotic. It's everybody is pure. Everybody is good intentioned. There's no chaos. It's very, very peaceful and very productive and efficient. So what they do is they send the new consciousnesses back here to let them get a taste of human Earth life, what it means to be a human, how Earth works, get their energy, their consciousness kind of tuned to this world, and then they go back to the dorm, have to go through further training before they're able to come into the H+ bodies. So in a way, part of our chaoticness here, and the reason why you meet some people and they seem so alien and foreign and stuff, is because there's a very good chance they absolutely are an alien consciousness that has been sent here as, like, they call them one-timers, right? So Robert Monroe, when he was in his first book, when he was exploring everything about the astral around Earth, there's this ring around Earth that's called the H-band, and that's where our spirit world is. That's where our consciousnesses reside. Well, outside of that, there was this one distant ring that's not connected at all, and they called that the last timer's ring, okay? So he thought at the time, in the first book, right? He has 3 books, and it goes through like the progression of his life. It's like decade, decade, decade. And in the first book, he thought that that last timer's ring was going to be like your ascended masters, like your people that are like, they're on their very last incarnation. Like they've done it all. They have nothing left to learn. They're living their last life as a shaman or a hermit or whatever, and then they're out of here. But no, he finds out later, and he puts this in the end of the second book, that no, that last timer ring is actually what's called one-timers. So it's not last time, well it is, but it's their first and last time. Essentially, they're separated from everybody else because they're not meant to go into the reincarnation cycle. They're meant just to come in, have a taste of Earth, have their experience, and then go back to, they called it home, but home, what they refer to as home, is the future, okay? So how wild is that? I mean, that means that I've talked about many times that this is a simulator for consciousness development. That's what I really believe in my heart is the point of this life. But when I thought about simulator for consciousness development, I wasn't thinking about the fact that the thing that we're training for, right? This is like a training grounds. It's like a boot camp for your soul, could actually be us evolving and graduating just to a different form of human consciousness on Earth. I always kind of saw it as, and I do believe they even say that you do eventually click out and you graduate from Earth completely. But we graduate from being a physical human first, right? So that's one of the things that we're working towards, is that before you are able to actually fully ascend and graduate and click out, you get to the point where you no longer need to come into the physical anymore. You've evolved past the need for the physical experience, and you exist primarily just in non-physical spirit form. And that's kind of the last step before you finally eventually graduate. So one of the things that we're learning to do through this physical experience is to not need the physical experience. That's one of the, it's kind of like when you make it to your senior year. That's how you know at your senior year, you're almost done, is when you're like, okay, I don't even need this. Meaning the physical experience is where we learn things like, cause and effect. It's where we learn the dualities, like hot and cold, good and bad. It's where we learn, heartbreak and love. And it's where we learn, like, when we make an action, we do something, there is a equal and opposite reaction. And that's how we learn. It's through our emotions and through our karmic cycles and all these things. And that's all done through the physical. So it's very, very important. But at a certain point, we don't need that anymore. Okay, so going back to like Nordics, Atlanteans, all that fun stuff, right? Sorry, I got a little off track there. I get excited about this stuff. It's very interesting. But so in the future, these H+, these humans that are in these pods under these trees that the human consciousnesses come down and basically just enter into and go out on excursions and stuff, those are remarkably beautiful, healthy, youthful, Ken doll, Barbie doll looking beings. And then people talk about these Nordic beings being the same way. Even in the future, when Robert would communicate with them, their mouths and lips and stuff never move. It's all telepathic. And when these people communicate with the Nordics today, it's all telepathic. That no one ever talks about their mouths moving. No one ever hears sound coming out of their mouth. They're completely telepathic. And made me think that could very well be a H+ body we call them Nordics. It's just a stupid word somebody came up with a long time ago because some of them have that kind of Scandinavian look. You know, a lot of them are blonde hair, blue-eyed, or green-eyed, or red hair, or whatever. But you know, even Robert Monroe talks about these H+, like some of them have dark hair and some of them have darker skin. It's not just these, you know, Ken doll looking people, but that is a common, you know, archetype. That's a common description that people give these things. And it makes me just think that at some point that's just sort of this default, you know, like maybe in the future that's kind of just a default character, you know, just your traditional Ken doll looking character. Because that's what so many of these Nordics look like. And that's the impression, even when Robert Monroe and when he's describing these beings in the future, when he's describing them, he describes them like that, like their skin is like this golden color, you know, and flowy hair and very like youthful and vibrant and healthy and stuff, just kind of the same way. So there's a very good chance that these H+ future humans, which are essentially just avatars, they are soulless containers, not meaning they're like evil or demonic or anything. They're soulless in the sense that you insert your soul into it. You know, it's like if you bought a car, the car doesn't come with a driver. That'd be weird, right? You go to the lot and you buy a car and you go to sit down, there's already a dude there. You're like, hey, what are you doing in my car? All right. So these human avatars are empty. They're containers. And you've even heard people like in the UFO world and UFO lore talk about how the body is nothing but a container. And people think that's like this dark thing. Like, oh, we're just containers. Containers for what? Containers for souls, for consciousness. Like that's exactly what we are. We are a container for consciousness. We're a vehicle, an avatar for consciousness. Our non-physical consciousness uses this vehicle to enter into, to have these physical experiences. That's exactly what it is. It's a container, not in some bad way, in a beautiful way. So these Nordics, these Ken dolls, these H+ from the future are these vehicles for consciousness. So whenever we see these Nordics here on Earth now that are doing different things and guiding us or you know, having these different encounters with people, it made me think they must be, and I'm not saying they have to be, but they could be these future humans and these craft that seem to be these like disposable throwaway type craft. And I say that because, you know, each one's different. So it's like if you go to AI, like say you go to ChatGPT and you're like, create an image of a UFO. It's going to create an image of a UFO. And then you say, okay, do it again. It's going to make another one. Guess what? It's going to be slightly different. So do that 100 times, you're going to get 100 slightly different variations. And that's what we see in the UFO world. And even with the Greys and the Nordics and all these beings, every single one is slightly different. Slightly different. Some Greys have smaller eyes. Some are more wraparound. Some of the Nordics are tall. Some of them are normal height. Like they're all slightly different. And that's what you would expect in this kind of, you know, scenario where you're sort of creating these temporary crafts and people and stuff, right? And this seems to be obviously this sort of technology or ability that we have in the future. And I don't even think it's the technology as much as it is just this capability of human beings that we have kind of mastered, you know, creation in that sense. So then what are they doing coming back here? You know, well, it seems that we have to get to that point, you know, in the future. And it seems like some of them come back here for like training purposes, that kind of stuff, right? So they said that they'll send consciousnesses back here to have like one go in this world just so they kind of, I don't know, understand what being human's like and all that kind of stuff because they've never done it before. It's like training. It's like a tutorial. So maybe some of these crafts and these beings are like overseers, like managers, like being, okay, we sent a bunch of people back, you know, we don't know, you know, I don't know what the vetting process is. Maybe some of these alien consciousnesses aren't, you know, all good or something. I don't know. And maybe some of these crafts and beings are monitoring that and kind of managing that, you know, just overseeing just to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Maybe they know that this world has, it seems, these cyclical cataclysms and these events, you know, because they can see bigger picture. They see how, you know, it's kind of like if you're in a car driving and there's like a cliff up ahead, you know, like say it's a mile down the road, I wouldn't be able to see it. But if somebody was up above, like in a helicopter, they'd be like, oh, there's a cliff up there, you might want to turn, you know, but I wouldn't see it. So it's almost like these beings just have a broader perspective and they can see things. And they seem to be like helping and guiding and that kind of stuff. And then there's also ones that just seem to be like kind of messing with stuff, you know, like pretending to be gods, you know, little g gods, and, you know, like just doing things not necessarily in a nefarious way, just kind of in a mischievous way. Like maybe they understand that this isn't base level reality. They understand, from when you see it from the point of view that I just described it, that this is kind of like a game in a sense. Obviously we don't know that because we're in it, so when you're in a game, just like when you're in a dream, you don't know it's a dream, you don't know it's a game, but maybe these other beings do, and they seem to just be kind of jacking around a little bit. I get that impression that, you watch the world sometimes and you see people and you're just like, like I was having this conversation yesterday with somebody about Elon Musk. He was asking my opinion on Elon, and I was like, it seems like he knows this is a game and he has the cheat codes and he's just having fun and he's not taking it too seriously. He's on a mission. He's on a very important mission to do things, but along the way, he has this playfulness, this kind of like you would if you were playing a game and you had the cheat codes. That's kind of seems to be the impression I get from watching him just interact in this reality. And you see that with a lot of other people too, where you're just like, we're out here kind of slaving away, taking this stuff very, very seriously. And other people are just kind of, skipping through, whistling and singing. And you're just like, like we're all playing this game a little differently, right? And maybe it's because some people know more than others, right? So that's the impression I get. And then, you talk to like government insiders and people in the government that'll tell you things like, they walk among us, like the aliens would be right here. You wouldn't even know. They walk right by you on the street. You'll see them at the supermarket and this kind of stuff. A lot of people say that they're in parts of the government and that they work directly with us and all this kind of stuff. And you think, okay, then are they aliens or are these like future humans, And then when you look at like the ancient past and these archaeological sites and things like that, and you start to like just really analyze it and you realize, how did they build the pyramids and the Sphinx and the heads at Easter Island, and how did they Stonehenge and all these things? Like, how did they do this stuff? And why are there so many like motifs in the reliefs and the artwork and the monuments and stuff that are the same all around the world? And, are these like people have even talked about like these cryo chambers for these big beings, these giants, these humans that are in these like kind of cryo chamber things and these like even space arcs. And I know we're getting off the rails here, but people talk about this stuff, that there's like space arcs on Earth with these cryo chambers with these large beings that are humans in there and stuff. And then, Robert Monroe talks about the future, and there's like pods under trees with these humans in them, and the humans are always a bit taller than regular humans and a bit, more muscular and just, that kind of that Ken doll look. And that's how people describe these kind of, they call them giants. They're not giants like 100 feet tall or anything. They're just big humans. And then they're in these like pods, right? And it's like, okay, so are these the same pods that Robert Monroe is talking about? The only reason I even bring all this stuff up is because there seems to be, like, say we got to a very advanced point in the future where time travel is really not a big deal. If they can just produce a perfect human being that is completely void of a consciousness and it's wired perfectly, and you can just basically like plug into it and operate it and do that carefree anytime you want, and then just kind of get out. And they talk about how they have this like biofield around them where it regulates the temperature and everything, that they create their own energy so they don't even have to eat food. They don't have to do this stuff, but they're human, they're biological. And it's like, okay, well, if they can do that, right? Like, and this is just year 3000 something. So we're not talking about like a million years in the future or anything, So it's like, okay, so obviously creating like an anti-gravity craft and be able to like take that physical avatar and actually traverse time and go back in time shouldn't be that hard. I mean, we're on the doorstep of that now. Some people think we cracked that in the 50s. So I guess my point is, then what would stop them from like going all the way back in time? Like say you wanted to just really escape, right? Really get some peace and quiet. Where would you go? Where would you go? You would go back in time before humans got all messy and noisy and dropping bombs and doing all the stuff we do now, satellites everywhere and messing up and polluting the earth and all that kind of stuff. You would go back in time, wouldn't you? Because guess what back in time is? Back in time, you could select. You could pick your place. Be like, ooh, this place is nice. There's no humans anywhere, no pollution, everything's perfect. And you could set up shop there, with your capabilities, your time traveling capabilities. And you could just kind of have your little R&R happy spot there. Well, what if that is the basis for like Atlantis? And, people talk about fallen angels, getting it on with human women and having these Nephilim and that kind of stuff. Well, what if that's like the fallen angels are like these future humans, this H plus, that are these soulless vessels, these vehicles for consciousness to inhabit and kind of joyride for the purpose of consciousness development and producing loosh and a little bit of R&R at a spiritual level. And, you know, they actually came back in time, and they weren't supposed to, obviously, but not everyone's going to do exactly what they're supposed to. But what if they, in this story, like, you know, were tempted by the human women, and that's the story of the fallen angels, you know, because you have to be the same species, you have to be compatible, you know, because you can't, you know, if you're not the same species, you can't get it on and produce anything, right? It's not the way nature works. So they'd have to be the same species. In this case, you know, these future humans, this H plus that Robert Monroe describes, is a engineered biological human being based on current humans, just fully activated and very advanced. So they could possibly be what we would call the fallen angels, you know? They could possibly be what we would call the Greek gods. They could possibly be what we would call the Atlanteans. They could possibly be what we call the Nordic aliens. And they might just be future human avatars. I don't know. It actually explains a lot of stuff in a weird way. Isn't that a wild thought? Anyways, I didn't even know that was a video I was going to do today. I just started pulling on that thread and there you go. Have fun making sense of all that. Let me know what you guys think. Please share this, like this, comment below. I'll see you on Saturday night with my lovely co-host Sarah so we can discuss all this good stuff. And as always, have a beautiful day. Peace.